welcome to another episode of the Retail Perch, where we talk about all things retail and technology and trends. And Gary, we're getting to some serious retail stuff, talking about saving money and produce and fruits in the last couple of episodes. And I think the last one was about screens. So it's great to see some of these technologies come to life.
Yeah, we have spread our discussions out across the supply chain.
Exactly. And it's fascinating each time that we think about how many technologies have to go in to make retail happen.
Yes.
It's quite fascinating. So today we happen to have another amazing guest, this time from San Diego, but I think they're really spread worldwide. Steve Statler, I want to invite you to the Retail Perch. Thank you for being a guest on the Retail Perch. So if you can take a few minutes, Steve, and tell us a little bit about your background, what you did in the past, how'd you wind up at your latest venture, and what do you do?
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thanks, Shekhar and Gary, for inviting me to your podcast. I think these channels are really important. We're all in a constant state of learning, and so you help us do that. So I, as you can tell from my accent, I don't come from around here. I grew up in England, but found my way via a whole bunch of technology companies to San Diego, mainly because Qualcomm's here, the biggest manufacturer of mobile semiconductor chips. And they get a small check every time anyone in the world buys a phone. So it's an amazing company to work for. And I joined their group that pioneered the App Store business. Even before Steve Jobs reinvented it, they were paying out billions of dollars to app developers for apps on feature phones. And that my involvement evolved into the retail space. We were always looking for new ways of getting wireless technology into the hands of people, and everybody shops. And so I came up with an idea and found a mentor who was kind of very senior businessman, and we formed Qualcomm Retail, and I learned a lot, and we did some interesting work. We deployed the first Bluetooth beacon technology in a nationwide retail chain. It was actually in the Apple stores, and the function was very simple. It was just making sure that people got a welcome to the store and a switch to store mode in the Apple app by having this, what at the time was very new technology, which is Bluetooth beacon technology, into all of their stores. And that was an incredible experience. A bunch of stuff happened. I left to start up my own companies and wrote a book on Bluetooth beacon technology called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Pico System. Actually, the publisher made me call it Beacon Technologies, but I like the first title. And one day I was doing a one-day training course at the RFID Journal live show on beacon technology. And this Israeli guy came up to me at the end of it and said, "Hey, we're planning to develop this Bluetooth beacon technology, and it's passive." And I kind of looked at him and felt a little embarrassed because I'd written this book and given this training course. I had no idea what he was talking about. What on earth is a passive Bluetooth beacon? But basically, what he was talking about was something that looked like an RFID tag. It was a label, but it could talk to Bluetooth devices, which are everywhere, in our pockets. We have phones and infrastructure. Now we have electronic shelf labels. And of course, what was my response to this amazing invitation to consult? I said, no, thanks, because I thought he was crazy. I just didn't believe him. And long story long, I ended up consulting for Tal Tamir. And this was a few weeks after they'd formed the company. They'd raised $10 million based on a business plan that you could have fitted on a cocktail napkin. But I just got to know them and thought, these guys are geniuses. They'd already pioneered a technology called millimeter wave, sold their previous technology to previous company to Qualcomm. And so I thought, if they can do this, this is just going to change the world. And so I was their first employee outside of Israel, and helped on writing business plans for fundraising and trying to find, what we would do with this postage stamp computer-sized thing that they were considering developing. And it turned out they weren't crazy, and it actually worked out great. We now have version 2 of this product, and those initial investors have seen the value of their investment grow, and we're now a company that's really well funded by folks like Amazon and Alibaba on the e-commerce side, on the telco side, Verizon, NTT, SoftBank. We have Maersk on the logistics side, Merck on the pharmaceutical side, and PepsiCo and Avery Dennison, who are the largest maker of smart labels. So it's been a really amazing journey, and we're now shipping our product and cloud services. And one of the key places where the technology is being used is in grocery stores.
Wow.
So that's my story.
So you're saying that this is the size of a postage stamp, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will be listening, but I'm holding up something which is a postage stamp size. And it's a computer. There's a chip there, which Wiliot's at its heart a semiconductor designer. So there was no chip that could do this on the market 5 years ago when the company was founded. And these guys designed a chip. It's basically 1 by 2 millimeters big. And it is an ARM processor. It has RAM, ROM, flash memory. It talks.
How is it being powered? Is it solar?
Well, it's recycling energy. It captures radio waves, energy from radio waves, which is very, very light. You know, you don't get a lot of energy from radio waves, right. Otherwise we'd fry.
Yeah. Right.
But it's capturing the energy from other Bluetooth sources, from Wi-Fi, from LoRa, which is a technology that Amazon has now incorporated in their smart speakers and door locks, and even from electronic shelf labels and from legacy RFID infrastructure. So we're surrounded by radio energy, and we're just kind of riding that wave, literally, the waves of energy, and we use it to power a tiny computer, which costs.
So how many milliamperes is it taking?
Well, we actually measure it in nanoamps, so it's
wow.
that.
Yeah,
it's that wow. Frugal, and yeah, if you're a kind of a wireless geek like I am, then just capturing the energy is pretty challenging. Then once you've captured it, how do I run a computer on what is not very much energy? And then, you know, how do I get it to communicate without all of the components that are normally in a computer? Normally these things are on a printed circuit board. And then how do I get it to encrypt and sense, which are all things that the technology does. And, you know, we've fitted this stuff onto things like this. What I'm holding now is a vial of COVID vaccine. It's got one of our labels on it. And that can not only give a unique identity, a serialized ID to the asset, but it can sense the temperature. Has it been kept at the right temperature to still be good? So whether it's COVID vaccine or strawberries, you want to keep these things at the right temperature. And this actually measures fill level as well. So this can be the basis of auto replenishment. So I know all of this sounds a bit kind of heady, way off into the high-tech world, but what it means to retailers, especially grocery retailers, is a move to real-time inventory and real-time supply chain, and not just identity, but also the sensing. So if you effectively can connect everything in the store to the internet, it changes how you run the store, it changes how you run the supply chain, and it allows you to reduce a huge amount of waste, to have better quality produce, to act more efficiently. So smaller number of staff delivering better service. It enables, in some cases, a smaller format store because you've got a tighter control of the inventory. And on top of that, a whole bunch of new business models. You can kind of move into subscription services. If you're a product company, then we're working with companies that aren't just integrating this into vials of vaccine, but containers for herbs and spices. And it's kind of the Amazon dash button where it kind of, the container knows when it's running it out, and it knows if this is expired. It can basically reorder.
So what kind of sensors are you able to mount on it? Is it just temperature sensors at this point?
So temperature is kind of the core. Every Wiliot IoT pixel, which is what we call the tags, can measure temperature, and the one I was showing you earlier can measure it can survive cryogenic freezing. So it's kind of really broad range of temperature. It's pretty accurate for something that next year will cost less than 10 cents a tag. But we can measure other things. So it's a little bit like a Tesla. You can upgrade the cloud software and unlock new sensing capabilities. So we've done a whole range of sensors from sensing chemistry. So there's the potential to measure ripeness based on all sorts of different chemicals that are excreted when product starts to get older. Proximity. So we've done some work with a company that wanted to know when customers were trying on their product. So you try on the product and then suddenly you can trigger a video that gives you information about the products that are being tried on. So full, empty, there's a whole range of things. But the basics are basically secure ID and temperature.
Wow. So every tag has a unique ID.
Yes. Yeah, we're members of GS1, and so this, there's another trend that we're riding, which is this move to serialization. So we were really delighted. We won the FDA's traceability challenge last year, and obviously there's more regulation about tracing food back to the farm, so that when someone gets sick from some bad spinach, we don't have to flush every spinach leaf in the country down the drain. So that is part of what we enable.
I'm guessing you probably speak to Sweet Greens or somebody like that.
And Steve, you said, I think next year the cost is going to come down to around 10 cents.
Yeah, less than 10 cents for the tag. So that's, and eventually we'll be similar to price to RFID tags, which are now down to 1 or 2 cents. We started off with something very functional and flexible, and that's how we got to market fast compared to comparable technologies. But the big the big difference in cost is the cost of the infrastructure. RFID, which is a sister technology. I mean, we are a radio frequency identifier. But the infrastructure that we use is very often existing infrastructure. So the thing that's held RFID back, which in many cases does similar things, is that you can pay a couple of $1,000 for an RFID scanner. But in our case, even when you have to buy new infrastructure, you're talking about tens of dollars. So what I'm holding now in my hand fits in the palm of your hand. And this costs about $40 to buy a reader for our tags. But our ultimate goal is to be infrastructure free, so that the other wireless devices in the store just automatically provide the energy and read our tags. And we've done some recent work for a very large grocery retailer, it's a national brand, where we could harvest the energy from the electronic shelf labels that they're rolling out. And so that gives you very precise location and a way of kind of monitoring with the existing infrastructure which products are where.
Got it. So the proximity within which you can read these tags is what? Foot?
It varies, but 10 meters is kind of one of the metrics. So the key breakthrough is when the infrastructure gets very low cost, you can go from having a snapshot of maybe what's come through the loading dock to having this real-time view of where everything is all of the time. And when you can do that, then you can start to spot things like cases of temperature sensitive product that have gone from a cooler in the back and they're on their way to a cooler in the front, but maybe they got left outside of any of the coolers. And whereas the past paradigm, maybe if you were lucky at the end of the day or the month, you got a report that showed that there are these anomalies. Our mode is real time. So that means sending real time alerts to the store manager or the distribution center manager or the farmer, because we go from farm to store, about something that's happened so it can be corrected immediately. Another example of that real-time intervention, when you can measure the asset or the item all the time, you can look at the flow of the product. And very often when produce is being harvested, it's a rush, right? And so you have the packing shed or the cooling refrigerated storage space on the farm. A lot of stuff can be pushed to the back, and your FIFO actually ends up degrading and turns into a LIFO, last in, first out. And that's a problem. And sometimes that produce can get stuck on the way for an extra day or two. And so what we found, we actually went public with our first farm to store case study with Israel's largest retailer, a company called Shufersal. And it got featured in the Wall Street Journal. It was the lead story in their logistics section. And one of the things that we found there is we could save a couple of days. We could put another couple of days of shelf life. We could cut a couple of days off of the journey from farm to store by looking at these anomalies, looking for the FIFO that's turned into a LIFO. We're allowing Shufersal to do true FIFO throughout the steps up to the store. And now at the store, what they're doing is something that I think we were talking offline about, which is the ripest first. Yeah. So you look at the temperature history over time, because you're constantly measuring. In this case, you don't put a tag on every head of lettuce. You put it on the crate of peppers or strawberries, and you can look at the accumulation of heat over time, and then you can order what goes out first based on what is ripest. And if you can do that, then the savings are on multiple fronts in multiple dimensions. It's less waste, so better for the environment. You're less write-offs, better quality product, longer life. It looks better on the shelf, and it lasts longer in the consumer's home. And I don't know about you, but I have an ongoing frustration with finding good tasting produce. And I will switch to almost any store where I think I can find better strawberries, because I'm just so fed up with getting them home and they're rotten. Well, they don't taste good. They taste like water,
Right.
So I think,
in fact, that was one of the things that came up, Steve, in that episode that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, was about was really about people getting produce home, and even people switching between stores because the quality of produce is better in one store over the other.
Absolutely.
And I guess it makes a total sense for the retailer to be on top of this. But I'm typically, I've got to say, you've done a first here. We don't have many times that Gary and I stay speechless listening to our guests for this long. but I think
I'm hogging the mic.
The story that you're saying, the capability that you're talking about is pretty fantastic. I mean, I'm looking at the form factor, and this is literally the size of a postage stamp. It's about 1 by 1 centimeter by 2 centimeters, or 1 inch by 2 inches, and flat, and it's amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Steve, do you foresee a day as the cost of those sensors continues to drop, where they go to the package level instead of the case level? And once you get to the package level, is there then a consumer facing application here where I, as the shopper, can, have that package of strawberries I just picked up at the store and understand its history in terms of temperature, or if I've got several packages in my refrigerator, which one I should maybe consume first?
No, you're exactly right, Gary. That's exactly where we're headed. And we've actually had a preview into that courtesy of the Japanese government. They have this entity, I think it's the Ministry for Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, who's been doing a lot of pioneering work on the RFID side. They actually pioneered a trial in Tokyo with one of our partners in Japan. We work with Sato, we work with NTT Docomo over there. So Sato, who make a lot of these RFID printers, they're a solution provider. They worked with a set of families in Tokyo where these tags were put on individual bags of lettuce and other produce, and they put these readers in the fridges of in these households.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And and they measured how long the produce was in the fridge, and they would actually prompt, not just with reminders, but with recipes on how you could use up these things before they went off. And, you know, we've already had discussions with the companies that make those plastic containers that we all know and love, that you use to put leftovers in and that sort of thing. And so you can imagine the tags on those. And actually, one of our customers makes appliances. They make washing machines and they make refrigerators. And in the past, you know, the RFID industry has done a lot of pioneering in this space, and they were talking with the same companies, and they had all sorts of visions of how these IDs and sensors could link in with the appliances, but it never happened because it's so hard to convince these appliance vendors to add another component in there. You know, they look at every penny. But Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are already in most of the new fridges and washing machines that are out there. And it's really just a matter of routing an antenna into the right place. And then you won't even need to put one of these little pucks in there to do that reading. And they will do it because they're interested in another business model, which is measuring the filters that you often forget to replace, or maybe you put one that's not kosher in there. And so I think I'm very optimistic about that happening. It's not going to happen overnight. And so we're very focused on farm to store. But this play that you alluded to, Gary, you know, it's going to happen, that consumer play. And we already have smart speakers that with a software upgrade could read these tags, and it'll extend beyond the kitchen to the bedroom, and you can imagine clothing. You know, how many people have a full closet full of clothing that they only wear like very occasionally? Sometimes maybe you go a whole year and half your wardrobe's been untouched.
Right.
So how about moving to, this isn't for everyone, I recognize, but think about a Netflix mode where you're kind of rent the runway type model of, oh, I'm not wearing this, I'm going to give it back, someone else can wear it, maybe I get some value back, and I can get new clothing that I like better, that maybe fits me better, that's for those of us that care about
it's the whole resource sharing model, right? So
exactly.
Absolutely. No, that's fascinating. I was just thinking, Gary, about what you're talking about. If you could get these small enough on produce and food that's sitting in your refrigerator, have a reader, and I have an app, and it just tells me, hey, you got 4 tomatoes that are going bad. And in fact, I remember, I think maybe about a year ago, we had somebody on the Retail Perch talking about an app that they put out called Empty Your Fridge. And what they did is connected an AI with a bunch of chefs, and it would, you could put the ingredients and it would come up with a recipe based on your specific taste buds. So if you said, I prefer Italian to Thai to Chinese, it would say, okay, based on this is what you can make with Chinese, and this is what you can do with Italian. I mean, it's a connected world. It's amazing what you can do. Right?
And those sensors go far beyond simply, you know, farm to table in the sense of, you know, greens, vegetables, fruits, etc. And there's applications in seafood. There's applications across any fresh product, right? Protein or otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's all of those things. And even, you know, as you manage the livestock, you can use it for, we've already been asked to put these tags on chickens. So internet connected everything. It's really, I mean, at one level, it's, you know, think of the impact the internet has made. It's changed everything, but, you know, essentially it's an entirely digital medium. We're just starting to connect the first few things. And it kind of feels like we're connecting a lot. You know, our cars are connected, maybe our appliances are starting to get connected, the smart speakers are. But if you added up all the things that are connected now in the world, it's probably, you know, a few tens of billions of things, which seems like a lot. But the future that we see is something we call massive IoT, the massive Internet of Things, where we go from billions to trillions. And you get there pretty quickly if you look at all of the clothing, the food containers, the medicine, and there is so much inefficiency. I'm a tree hugger, and I gave up long ago trying to convince companies to do something that's against their interests. But I think we have a real opportunity to align people, profit, and planet just by making things more efficient. We don't need to ask people to do unnatural things. If we take the 40% of food that we throw away, which accounts for 10% of the carbon emissions, and we reduce that, that would be an amazing thing to fight climate change. Then you look at all the medicine that we, get prescribed and don't take because we're not tracking it. And one of our investors makes pharmaceuticals. We're working with many other pharmaceutical companies. And all this stuff takes a while, but imagine all of your medicine being connected. And how often do people go to their doctor and say, "Oh, this isn't working," especially kids? It's like, it's not working. Are you taking it? Yeah, of course I'm taking it. Well, are they really? So this medical adherence, whether it's putting these tags on knee braces, have you been doing your exercises? Really? Have you really been doing your physio? There's so much that we can do if we connect, if we take the power of the internet and apply it to the 95% of things that are not connected, then there's huge opportunities in terms of convenience, quality, safety, reducing waste. And the internet's only just started because most things are not connected, but very soon we believe they will be.
I mean, I look at my mesh network at home and I see 68 devices connected, right? It's a lot because I have temperature sensors, I have cameras, I have switches, I have my thermostat, my smart speakers, my all the other devices. Everybody's got at least 3 devices. They have a laptop and an iPad and a phone, plus a watch. So it's just, I can imagine, you're going to pretty soon have a home with hundreds of devices in them, which does everything from measuring the moisture in your indoor plants to automatically watering them. And So where do you think privacy plays in all this? Because that seems to be also another topic that's a big, so how do you protect privacy when there's so much data flowing out of these devices?
It's really important. And it's probably, we looked at the future of the company. It's like, what could possibly go wrong? Because there's so many benefits. I mean, no one needs to lose their driving license, their passport, their keys ever again. But what could possibly go wrong? Well, people could get freaked out by this. So one of the decisions that we made was to put encryption onto the silicon of this chip, which is, again, different to RFID. RFID essentially broadcasts everything in the clear. It doesn't matter too much because not many of us have $1,000 RFID reader, but we all have a phone. So this was kind of something we had to look at right from the beginning. And so when you start encrypting the data, interesting things happen. You suddenly get accountability and ownership. When that tag is broadcasting something that is encrypted, then only the owner has access to it. And so suddenly you have someone that is responsible for GDPR, the privacy regulations that are now pervasive in Europe and now starting to arrive on our shores, especially in places like California. So when you have encryption, you have the ability to turn access on or off. You have the ability to transfer ownership. And so ultimately, we should own the data that we own on the products that we buy. That's the future we see, is that there's accountability for the data. It's not like a QR code that can be read by anyone. And people have the ability to opt out. Not everyone's going to want to do this. Actually, beyond opt out, it has to be an opt-in. So that's the law in most of the world. There aren't good ways of enforcing it in all the places, but that can be done. So we take privacy seriously. It's part of our business model. We actually decided that we would build the company around the cloud services. We've actually licensed the chips for free to anyone that wanted to make the tag. So we now have all of the big smart label manufacturers, Avery Dennison, Identiv, Shriner. There's a whole bunch of people that make NFC, RFID tags, QR code tags that now can make a Wiliot IoT Pixel. And if they buy the chip directly from the fab, they don't have to pay us anything. So you can put this technology everywhere, and then you can decide to turn it on if you want to use it. And that's the approach that we are taking to try and bring down the cost of entry. So first things first, we think that plastic crates, even though they're not the most glamorous thing, you know, before we get to the bags of lettuce and the clothing, let's just make our supply chain more efficient. And more people are using these reusable plastic crates. So you can turn it into a smart crate in a few seconds by putting a couple of our tags on, and then suddenly you can manage your fleet of crates, and maybe you don't need 5 million crates. You can just have 4 million crates if you know where they are in real time. And then when they start to get lost or stolen, as sometimes is the case, then you can put a stop to that really fast. And then once you've done that, then let's look at what's in the crate and start to look at extending shelf life.
So if there's a retailer listening to this podcast, what is the application that they typically have seen? What's the most popular things that you get to do with this that can impact their operation?
Well, I think that management of reusable transport items, whether it's a pallet or a crate, even now some of the cardboard boxes, if you start delivering stuff directly to consumer, then that shrink of the pool of reusable transport items really gets big. We have a customer that's delivering ice cream to their customers, and they deliver it in this beautiful thermal pouch. And you can imagine those go walkies very fast because they're real utility. So that's really what's driving a lot of the use cases. There's 1,000, 1 million things you could do with these. And so last year, it used to be our model was, we'll work with only the largest companies in the world. You have to pay us tens, $100,000 before we can spend time with you because we're limited in size. But I'm really pleased we switched from that model last year, and we now have starter kits. So $500, you can go to wiliot.com, buy the technology, play with it. So anyone that's got an innovation team can start to experiment. And we're probably going to be coming up with kits that are even lower cost, just a few tens of dollars. If I have my way, we'll have a $30 kit by the end of the year, so that anyone, whether it's a school kid, can experiment. And we're starting to experiment with new ways of integrating the tags with applications. So drag and drop interfaces with pre-built connectors to things like SAP. And we're actually incubating an idea that allows you to use basic website building tools to interface with our tags with something called Trusted Physical Web. And that will allow anyone that has access to someone who can write a web page start to link in our technology, and you'll have our tags triggering menus for people that are waiting at the delicatessen, or giving menu items to people that are waiting to be served in a stadium, or if someone's at a zoo and they want to understand more about the animal, our tags will broadcast a URL to a browser on the phone. And then I think that will, at the moment, you have to develop an app to use our product. But once we get to Trusted Physical Web, then basically any adolescent who can create a website will be able to tap into this.
Well, yeah, there's no end to where that technology goes.
Yeah, and I think what's the most fascinating is the low power nature, right? Which was typically a blocker initially when beacons came out. They'd last for 2 months and 3 months, and then of course now you have more longer lasting beacons. But this is fascinating. This is almost as good as like you said, a postage stamp. Just stick it on it and forget it. And it must have taken. So where did the technology to harvest this ambient energy? Where's that come from?
Really the brains of our founders, they developed millimeter wave, which is the thing that makes 5G faster than 4G. So they I mean, I just marvel at the innovation. There's a ton of patents they produced around this technology, and we, tried a bunch of things in the early days, and some of them didn't work, and some of them did work. But they've got this kind of Israeli approach to innovation where they're kind of fearless and they work at an incredibly rapid pace. So normally, when you're developing a chip, it takes a year or two. I remember the first test chips, they did 6 in 1 year. So rather than 2 years, 2 months. And they would actually put out a design and then do the next one and then do the next one. And then they were doing this in parallel. And again, it was this idea of let's develop something that's really functional. It'll be postage stamp size, but rather than going straight to the bare bones, we'll make it a fully programmable computer. And they started off with that. And then, the approach to running a computer on very little energy, they use a technique called wave computing, which is rather than running this ARM processor with big programs, what we do is break the program down into small bite-sized chunks. So a wave of energy comes in, and we do the first bit, and then another wave of energy comes in and we do the next bit. And each time it does some processing, it saves the results in some special memory that basically retains the values. And so there's just a ton of really interesting techniques like that. And then they stripped out components. Normally radios have crystals. You think back to the crystal set that maybe you or your parents had to listen to the radio. As well as a battery-free radio, it's a crystal-free radio, and crystals are used, they're like the tuning knob on a radio to get the right frequency. And the chip actually looks around for other radio signals, and it says, oh, that looks like a Bluetooth signal. Let's use the timing that signal used to calibrate our radio. So it's not just, let's take an off-the-shelf radio and run a bit less energy through. It's a complete redesign with this paradigm of we want to connect 1 trillion things to the internet, and we want to democratize the Internet of Things and make it go beyond the Internet of expensive things, which is really what it is at the moment, cars and appliances and gas meters, to the Internet of everything, everyday things.
That's fascinating. No, it's fascinating. And it's just staggering the amount of data this also produces that has to be then processed. And well,
this is where AI comes in very handy, because so there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And the software, it's not just running on the tag, it runs on the edge, it runs on the Wi-Fi access points and the other things that are reading it. So and the cloud. So, I look at the way the engineers solve this, and they looked at it very holistically. They started off with this goal, let's democratize IoT. And then what do we need to do? Rather than kind of looking at it at a component level. And that's how I think they managed to come up with so many breakthroughs. It's a privilege to work here. I'm a podcaster and a writer, and I feel like I'm just documenting a little bit of high-tech history, seeing the way this thing's rolling out.
Yeah, I could geek out on this all day. So I have a background in digital signal processing, and that's kind of what I did in college in my early years working. So this is something I understand and quite enjoy, but it's amazing some of the breakthroughs. And I think what's fascinating here is the application to retail and how it can actually change everyday consumers' lives. I think that's where it gets really, really exciting.
And it's funny, it's a double-edged sword, because I go into any retail environment, I always look for problems. I'm fascinated by shopping, this thing that we all do. And we're all retail experts at some level. We know what frustrates us. And I'm like, oh, if only you had this technology in your store. Like I was in an outdoor goods store the other day, and my wife's going on this hiking trip. She's just retired. She's going to be going off to the Dolomites. And so we're like buying sleeping bags and hiking boots. And we went to buy the sleeping bag, and it was an amazing experience. It was like the concierge experience. We had a great advisor, try these different things. This is what I use when I go hiking. Where are you going? So it was like the model retail experience. We spent a lot of money on that sleeping bag, and we were delighted. Same store, we go to buy the boots, and it's like a battlefield in the shoe department. There's like 2 people that are working there. They're running from pillar to post, full of people that are frowning and angry because they've been waiting for 20 minutes to get served. And it's because they have no idea where everything is. They don't know what's in stock, and they're basically doing the job of a robot, which is running backwards and forwards and shooting things, trying to find things. So, if they have Wiliot tags on the inventory, then they know where everything is, and they could say, you like that style, maybe we can ship the things we don't have to stock to your home. And, same retailer, same culture of serving the customer. But, when you have your staff overloaded, then, everyone's miserable, and it doesn't have to be that way. And the essence of it is just know where everything is, and when things get lost, find out about it in real time. And so I'm very hopeful that shopping will be more fun. And I'm a big believer in brick and mortar retail. I think it's important to our communities. And I really hope that this technology will help. And we see it is. We've got retailers that see this as a path to keeping the doors open by having leaner supply chains, more of a showroom type retail storefront where you can have just the right number of everything in the front of the store, smaller staff contingent that are doing selling and relationship building rather than finding.
Yeah. No, and I think, for people who are listening to this episode, I think it's an opportunity. I mean, it could spark all kinds of ideas for business, because I think ultimately retailers are so busy running operations, especially the middle tier. They don't have the time to really take something like this and make an application out of it. So, which means it spawns a whole set of people who can actually take this and say, okay, what can I do to service this industry and create these applications? And
I'm glad you said that, because it's very important. I think Wiliot's a wonderful company, but we can't do everything. We're not trying to do everything. It's a platform company. I think it's more like an app store or an operating system. But we need applications, and there's, every retail segment needs different applications. The way you run a shoe store is different to a convenience store, different to a grocery store. And so, there's huge opportunities for everyone from systems integrators, software developers, device manufacturers, people that do technology deployment. And so anyone that's kind of got involved in RFID is a great example. If you've done that, then you already know, 2/3 of what you need to know to deploy this technology. And so we really encourage people to experiment, play, and
so Steve, if I'm not mistaken, you can go on the Wiliot site and then order a dev kit, I guess. You can buy and then go and experiment away and plug away and try to come up with interesting applications. Yeah, that's
exactly right.
Super exciting. I mean, I'm sure there's, hopefully there's some smart people listening to this podcast and will come up with some cool ideas of what they can do. But this has been a great conversation, Gary. As usual, time flies by. So when we get into the Retail Perch episode, we get into a kind of like a accelerated time tunnel. It seems like we start and we're at the end before we know it. But I have gotten some feedback from some people that they actually quite enjoy some of these geek rants that we get onto. It's been very informative, Stephen. I'm certainly very excited. I'm going to go check out Wiliot and see if I can order myself a kit here. So
wonderful.
Gary?
It's been great to talk with you guys, and thank you for the work that you're doing helping get the word out.
Oh yeah, no, it's been this is like fun for us. Gary, any thoughts before we close out?
Fascinating discussion, Steve. This is an area I've been watching for a long time. Seen development of sensors, temperature sensors, and so on applied to fresh food monitoring. But what really excites me is the opportunity to take this to the ultimate consumer, the ultimate shopper, right? So they've got knowledge of all the food, all the products, and sort of their history. So exciting stuff. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. And Steve, if you don't I saw you hold up a Wiliot coffee mug, but if you do
yes.
if you send us your address to Stephanie specifically, she will send you a Retail Perch coffee mug, and that you can get in the mail, which can be one of those trophies that you proudly display that I was on Retail Perch.
And the next time
will definitely
you can use that.
That's right. And we can put a little Wiliot IoT sensor on it, which will tell you if the coffee is still hot on your.
You laughed, but we actually did that at RFID Journal Live. We ran a class. Everyone got a coffee cup with. We actually had 3 tags on each of them to measure how full it was, how hot the coffee was. And we had a little display that showed it. So you were making a joke, but actually you were predicting, or you had a omniscient view of what was being done with our technology. And I love the mug idea. I do a podcast called Mr. Beacon, where it's truly a geek thing. We focus on IoT, Bluetooth beacons and tags. And I've been saying we need to give people a mug as a thank you. And so you've inspired me. We're going to do it.
And we'll of course read it on our back end to see how many cups of coffee you're having a day.
That's scary.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been fantastic speaking to you. And guys, I just want to shout out to all the people who listen and support us. Appreciate it. Your enthusiasm keeps us going, and we promise to keep getting you exciting guests and great talks like this with Steve. And thank you again, Steve. Gary, anything before we sign off?
No, that's great. Steve, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Bye. Make sure to join us every Monday and connect with us at the Retail Perch on Instagram and Facebook.
And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at theretailperch@birdseye.com.
Until next time, this is Shaker.
And this is Gary, signing off.